Welcome to the 11th day of CraftLit, our 12-day Christmas story extravaganza. Today, on our 11th day, I'm taking it down a notch. Yesterday, we had a lot of fun. Our 10th day had a great deal of humor in it. Today, we're getting a little sentimental and a little reflective of the season. We have a Dickens piece that is very reflective, not written when he was a young man. We have St. Nicholas, a short piece by Horatio Alger, of all people. We have a very sentimental and sweet story called The House of the Seven Santas that was written in 1908 by John Kendrick Bangs, who we've heard from before, the child who had everything but, and Santa Claus and Little Billy. This is the same guy. And then we end it with a marvelous piece of writing, a Christmas sermon that was written by Robert Louis Stevenson. If the only thing you know from Robert Louis Stevenson is Jekyll and Hyde, this will shock you. If you only know Treasure Island, this might surprise you a little bit. Either way, it's a really good Christmas sermon. And, like some of our other texts, awfully applicable to today. So sit back, reflect on the season, grab a mug of something warm, and enjoy our 11th day of CraftLit.
Holy babe, thine angels watch around, all bending low with folded wings before the incarnate King of Kings, in reverent or profound, in reverent or profound.
What Christmas Is as We Grow Older, by Charles Dickens. Time was, with most of us, when Christmas Day, encircling all our limited world like a magic ring, left nothing out for us to miss or seek. Bound together all our home enjoyments, affections, and hopes, grouped everything and every one around the Christmas fire, and made the little picture shining in our bright young eyes complete. Time came, perhaps all so soon, when our thoughts overleaped that narrow boundary, when there was someone, very dear we thought then, very beautiful and absolutely perfect, wanting to the fullness of our happiness, when we were wanting too, or we thought so, which did just as well, at the Christmas hearth by which that same one sat, and when we intertwined with every wreath and garland of our life that someone's name. That was the time for the bright visionary Christmases which have long arisen from us to show faintly, after summer rain, in the palest edges of the rainbow. That was the time for the beatified enjoyment of the things that were to be, never were, and yet the things that were so real in our resolute hope that it would be hard to say now what realities achieved since have been stronger. What? Did that Christmas never really come, when we and the priceless pearl who was our young choice were received, after the happiest of totally impossible marriages, by the two united families previously at daggers, drawn on our account? When brothers and sisters-in-law, who had always been rather cool to us before our relationship was effected, perfectly doted on us, and when fathers and mothers overwhelmed us with unlimited incomes? Was that Christmas dinner never really eaten, after which we arose and generously and eloquently rendered honour to our late rival, present in the company, then and there exchanging friendship and forgiveness, and founding an attachment not to be surpassed in Greek or Roman story, which subsisted until death? Has that same rival long ceased to care for that same priceless pearl, and married for money and become usurious? Above all, do we really know now that we should probably have been miserable if we had won and worn the pearl, and that we are better without her? That Christmas, when we had recently achieved so much fame, when we had been carried in triumph somewhere for doing something great and good, when we had won an honoured and ennobled name, and arrived and were received at home in a shower of tears of joy. Is it possible that that Christmas has not come yet? And is our life here at the best so constituted that, pausing as we advance at such a noticeable milestone in the track of this great birthday, that we look back on the things that never were, as naturally and full as gravely as on the things that have been and are gone, or have been and still are? If it be so, and so it seems to be, must we come to the conclusion that life is little better than a dream, and little worth the loves and strivings that we crowd into it? No, far be such miscalled philosophy from us, dear reader, on Christmas Day. Nearer and closer to our hearts be the Christmas spirit, which is the spirit of active usefulness, perseverance, cheerful discharge of duty, kindness, and forbearance. It is in the last virtues especially that we are, or should be, strengthened by the unaccompanied visions of our youth. For who shall say that they are not our teachers to deal gently even with the impalpable nothings of the earth? Therefore, as we grow older, let us be more thankful that the circle of our Christmas associations and of the lessons that they bring expands. Let us welcome every one of them, and summon them to take their places by the Christmas hearth. Welcome, old aspirations, glittering creatures of an ardent fancy, to your shelter underneath the holly. We know you, and have not outlived you yet. Welcome, old projects and old loves, however fleeting, to your nooks among the steadier lights that burn around us. Welcome, all that was ever real to our hearts, and for the earnestness that made you real, thanks to heaven. Do we build no Christmas castles in the clouds now? Let our thoughts, fluttering like butterflies among these flowers of children, bear witness. Before this boy there stretches out a future, brighter than we ever looked on in our old romantic time, but bright with honor and with truth. Around this little head, on which the sunny curls lie heaped, the Graces sport as prettily, as airily, as when there was no scythe within the reach of time to shear away the curls of our first love. Upon another girl's face near it, placider but smiling bright, a quiet and contented little face, we see home fairly written. Shining from the word as rays shine from a star, we see how, when our graves are old, other hopes than ours are young, other hearts than ours are moved, how other ways are smoothed, how other happiness blooms, ripens, and decays. No, not decays, for other homes and other bands of children, not yet in being, or for ages yet to be, arise and bloom and ripen to the end of all. Welcome everything. Welcome alike what has been, and what never was, and what we hope may be, to your shelter underneath the holly, to your places around the Christmas fire, where what is sits open-hearted. In yonder shadow do we see obtruding furtively upon the blaze an enemy's face. By Christmas Day we do forgive him. If the injury he has done us may admit to such companionship, let him come here and take his place. If otherwise, unhappily, let him go hence, assured that we will never injure nor accuse him. On this day we shut out nothing. Pause, says a low voice. Nothing? Think. On Christmas Day we will shut out from our fireside nothing. Not the shadow of a vast city where the withered leaves are lying deep, the voice replies. Not the shadow that darkens the whole globe. Not the shadow of the city of the dead. Not even that. Of all days in the year, we will turn our faces towards that city upon Christmas Day, and from its silent hosts bring those we loved among us. City of the dead, in the blessed name wherein we are gathered together at this time, and in the presence that is here among us according to the promise, we will receive and not dismiss thy people who are dear to us. Yes, we can look upon these children angels that alight so solemnly, so beautifully among the living children by the fire, and can bear to think how they departed from us. Entertaining angels unawares, as the patriarchs did, the playful children are unconscious of their guests, but we can see them, can see a radiant arm around one favourite neck, as if there were a tempting of that child away. Among the celestial figures there is one, a poor misshapen boy on earth, of a glorious beauty now, of whom his dying mother said it grieved her much to leave him here alone, for so many years as it was likely would elapse before he came to her, being such a little child. But he went quickly, and was laid upon her breast, and in her hand she leads him. There was a gallant boy who fell far away upon a burning sand beneath a burning sun, and said, "Tell them at home, with my last love, how much I could have wished to kiss them once, but that I died contented, and have done my duty." Or there was another, over whom they read the words, "Therefore we commit his body to the deep," and so consigned him to the lonely ocean, and sailed on. And there was another, who lay down to his rest in the dark shadow of great forests, and on earth awoke no more. Oh, shall they not, from sand and sea and forest, be brought home at such a time? There was a dear girl, almost a woman, never to be one, who made a morning Christmas in a house of joy, and went her trackless way to the silent city. Do we recollect her, worn out, faintly whispering what could not be heard, and falling into the last sleep for weariness? Oh, look upon her now! Oh, look upon her beauty, her serenity, her changeless youth, her happiness! The daughter of Jairus was recalled to life, to die, but she, more blessed, has heard the same voice, saying unto her, "Arise forever." We had a friend, who was a friend from early days, with whom we often pictured the changes that were to come upon our lives, and merrily imagined how we would speak and walk and think and talk when we came to be old. His destined habitation in the city of the dead received him in his prime. Shall he be shut out from our Christmas remembrance? Would his love have so excluded us? Lost friend, lost child, lost parent, sister, brother, husband, wife, we will not so discard you. You shall hold your cherished places in our Christmas hearts, and by our Christmas fires, and in the season of immortal hope, and on the birthday of immortal mercy, we will shut out nothing. The winter sun goes down over town and village. On the sea it makes a rosy path, as if the sacred tread were fresh upon the water. A few more moments, and it sinks, and night comes on, and lights begin to sparkle in the prospect. On the hillside beyond the shapelessly diffused town, and in the quiet keeping of the trees that gird the village steeple, remembrances are cut in stone, planted in common flowers, growing in grass, entwined with lowly brambles around many a mound of earth. In town and village there are doors and windows closed against the weather, there are flaming logs heaped high, there are joyful faces, there is healthy music of voices. Be all ungentleness and harm excluded from the temples of the household gods, but be those remembrances admitted tender encouragement. They are of the time and all its comforting and peaceful reassurances, and of the history that reunited even upon earth the living and the dead, and of the broad beneficence and goodness that too many men have tried to tear into narrow shreds.
Fireside Christmas Short Stories by Various. Saint Nicholas by Horatio Alger, Jr. Recording by Claudia Salto. In the far-off polar seas, far beyond the Hebrides, where the icebergs, towering high, seem to pierce the wintry sky, and the fur-clad Eskimo glides in sledges o'er the snow, dwells Saint Nick, the merry wight, patron saint of Christmas night. Solid walls of massive ice, bearing many a quaint device, flanked by graceful turrets twain, clear as clearest porcelain, bearing at a lofty height Christ's pure cross in simple white, carven with surpassing art from an iceberg's crystal heart. Here Saint Nick, in royal state, dwells until December late, clips the days at either end, and the nights at each extent. Then, with his attendant sprites, scours the earth on wintry nights, bringing home in well-filled hands children's gifts from many lands. Here are whistles, tops, and toys, meant to gladden little boys, skates and sleds that soon will glide o'er the ice or steep hillside. Here are dolls with flaxen curls, sure to charm the little girls, Christmas books with pictures gay for this welcome holiday. In the court the reindeer wait, fill the sledge with costly freight. As the first faint shadow falls, promptly from his icy halls steps Saint Nick and grasps the rein, and afar in measured time sounds the sleigh bell's silver chime. Like an arrow from the bow speed the reindeer o'er the snow. Onward now the loaded sleigh skirts the shores of Hudson's Bay, onward till the stunted tree gains a loftier majesty, and the curling smoke wreaths rise under less inclement skies. Built upon a hillside steep lies a city wrapped in sleep. Up and down the lonely street sleepy watchmen pace their beat. Little heeds them Santa Claus, not for him are human laws. With a leap he leaves the ground, scales the chimney at a bound. 5 small stockings hang below, 5 small stockings in a row. From his pocket blithe Saint Nick fills the waiting stockings quick, some with sweetmeats, some with toys, gifts for girls and gifts for boys, mounts the chimney like a bird, and the bells are once more heard. Santa Claus, good Christmas saint, in whose heart no selfish taint findeth place, some homes there be where no stockings wait for thee, homes where sad young faces wear painful marks of want and care, and the Christmas morning brings no fair hope of better things. Can you not some crumbs bestow on these children steeped in woe? Steal a single look of care which their sad young faces wear, from your overflowing store give to them whose hearts are sore? No sad eyes should greet the morn when the infant Christ was born.
Slowly fall the snowflakes, hang the holly high, bright its berries greeting.
A Little Book of Christmas by John Kendrick Bangs, Section 4, The House of the Seven Santas. For once the Weather Bureau had scored a good, clean hit. The bull's-eye was pierced squarely in the middle, and the promised blizzard falling upon the city at noon held the metropolis completely in its grip. Everything in the line of public transportation in and out of the town was tied up so tightly that it did not seem possible that it would ever be unraveled again. The snow was piling waist high upon the streets, and the cutting winds played their fantastic pranks with a chill and cruel persistence. It was with great difficulty that Dobbleigh made his way into the Grand Central Railway Station. Like other suburban commuters at Christmas time, he was heavily laden with bundles of one kind and another. He fairly oozed packages. They stuck out of the pockets of his heavy ulster. A half dozen fastened together with a heavy cord he carried in his right hand, and some were slung about his shoulders and held there by means of a leathern strap. The real truth was that Dobbleigh had been either too busy or had forgotten the wise resolutions of the autumn, and had failed to do his Christmas shopping early, with the result that now, on Christmas Eve, he was returning to the little Dobbleighs with a veritable Santa Claus's pack, whose contents were designed to delight their eyes in the early hours of the coming morning. It was with a great sense of relief that he entered the vast waiting room of the station, and shook the accumulated snow from his coat, and removed the infant icicles from his eyes, but his joy was short-lived. Making his way to the door, he paused to wish the venerable doorman a Merry Christmas. "Fierce night, Hawkins," he said, as he readjusted his packages. "I shall be glad enough to get home." The old man shook his head dubiously. "I'm afraid you won't enjoy that luxury to-night, Mr. Dobbleigh," he said. "We haven't been able to get a train out of here since 1 o'clock, and the way things look now, there won't be any business at this stand for 24 hours, even if we have luck." "What's that?" returned Dobbleigh. "You don't mean to say—" "No trains out to-night, sir," said the doorman. "The line's out of commission from here to Buffalo, anyhow, and nobody knows what's going on west of here. The wires are down, and we're completely shut off from the world." Dobbleigh gave a low, long whistle. "By Jove, Hawkins," he muttered ruefully, "that's tough." "Kind of hard on the kiddies, eh?" said the old doorman sympathetically. "Mighty hard," said Dobbleigh, with a catch in his voice. "No chance of anything? Not even a freight?" he went on anxiously. "Couldn't pull a feather through with 30 locomotives," was the disheartening response. "I guess it's the hotel for yours to-night, sir." Dobbleigh turned away, and pondered deeply for a few moments. Taking care of himself for the night was not, under the circumstances, a very difficult proposition, for his club was not far away, so that he was not confronted with the uncomfortable prospect of sleeping on the benches of the railway station, but the idea of the little Dobbleighs not finding their treasures awaiting them on the morrow, to say nothing of the anxiety of Mrs. Dobbleigh over his non-arrival, was, to say the least, disconcerting. "Oh, well," he said philosophically, after going over the pros and cons of the situation carefully, "what's the use of worrying? What must be, and I'll have to make the best of it." He buttoned his heavy coat up snugly about his neck, and, seizing his bundles with a firmer grip, wished the old doorman a good night, and went out again into the storm. 15 minutes later, looking more like a snowman than an ordinary human being, he entered the club, and if it be true that misery finds comfort in company, he was not doomed to go without consolation. There were 5 other fellow sufferers there, trying to make the best of it. "Hello, Dobby!" cried his friend and neighbor Grantham. "What's happened to you? An 18-carat family man spending his Christmas Eve at a club? Shame on you!" "I am duly repentant, Gran," replied Dobbleigh. "But you see, as your neighbor, I felt it my duty to keep an eye on you this night. There are hobgoblins in the air. Why are you not at home in the bosom of your family yourself?" "The walking is too bad," said Grantham. "And besides, that confounded valet of mine forgot to put my snowshoes in my suit case." "They say the river is frozen solid all the way up," put in Billy Ricketts, who is a good deal of a wag, as all old bachelors are apt to be. "Why don't you fellows skate home?" "I tried it," smiled Grantham, "but the wind is blowing down the river, and I live up. I hadn't been going more than 2 hours when I landed on Staten Island." In this way the exiles strove to comfort each other, and on the surface succeeded, but inwardly a very miserable lot they were. Clubs have their attractions, but we have not yet succeeded in developing an institution of that kind which is a fair substitute for the home fireside on a Christmas Eve. Even the most confirmed old bachelor will confess to you that, way down deep in his heart, the comforts of such organizations seem cheerless and cold in contrast to the visions of smiling hearthstones and merry gatherings of happy children that come to them in their dreams. "You've got some bundle there, Dobby," said Grantham, as Dobbleigh relieved himself of his burden of packages. "What are you going to do? Open a department store?" "Ah!" ejaculated Ricketts. "You're a fine fellow to talk. Ought to have seen Gran when he staggered in here an hour ago, Dobby. I thought at first he was a branch office of the American Express Company. Honest, I did. Talk about your bundle trust. Gran had the market cornered." "Well, why shouldn't I have?" demanded Grantham. "Haven't I got 5 of the finest kids that ever climbed a Christmas tree?" "Nope," said Dobbleigh with an air of conviction. "Your 5 are dandies, Gran, but you ought to see my 6." "I've seen 'em," said Grantham, "and I'll give every blessed one of 'em honorable mention as high steppers and thoroughbreds, but when it comes to the real thing, well, my 5 are blue ribbon kids, all right, all right." "How you fathers do brag about little things!" snorted Ricketts. "You two braggarts can roll your 11 into 1, and the aggregate wouldn't be a marker to what my children would be, if I had any. I've half a mind to give up my state of single blessedness just to show you vainglorious chaps what—" Just what Ricketts was going to show the assembled gathering the world will never be able to do more than guess, for he was not permitted to finish the sentence. It was at this precise point that Dr. Mallerby, shedding snow from his broad, burly figure at every step, staggered into the room, and, with a scant greeting to his friends, hastened to the blazing log fire on the club hearth, and, kneeling before it, began unwrapping a bundle of some size that he too carried in his arms. "What on earth have you got there, Doctor?" cried Ricketts, craning his neck over the newcomer's shoulder. "One of these new character dolls?" "No, Billy, no," said Mallerby, fumbling away at the bundle. "I wish to heaven it were. Can't you see, old man? It's the real thing." "The real what?" said Ricketts, bending lower. "The real thing," returned Mallerby in a low voice. "A poor little tot of a newsboy." "Where on earth did you pick him up?" gasped Ricketts as the others gathered round. "Out of the storm," said Mallerby. "I found him huddled up in the vestibule of Colonel Mortimer's when I came out of the house 10 minutes ago. The poor little devil was curled up almost into a knot, trying to keep warm, and lay there fast asleep, with his papers under his arm. I honestly believe that if I hadn't come out when I did, it would have been too late. This is a fierce storm." "He isn't frozen, is he?" faltered Dobbleigh, as he gazed into the blue little face of the unconscious urchin, a face grimy with the frequent mixture of 2 dirty little fists and his tears. "Not quite," said Mallerby. "I think I got him in time, and he'll pull through, but he had a mighty close call of it. By George, boys, just think of a wee bit of a tot like that, barely more than 6 years old, having to be out on a night like this. Why, the poor little cuss ought to be dreaming of Santa Claus in a nice warm bed somewhere, instead of picking pennies out of these Arctic streets of ours in order to keep body and soul together." Warmed by the glow of the fire, the youngster stirred as the doctor spoke, and a weary little voice, scarce higher than a whisper, broke the stillness of the room. "Extry! Biggest blizzard in 20 years! Extry! Piper, sir?" The 7 sophisticated men of the world, gathered about the prostrate figure, stood silent, and 3 of them turned away, lest the others should see the unmanly moisture of their eyes. "Here, by thunder!" gasped Ricketts, pulling a roll of bills from his pocket. "Hanged if I won't buy the whole edition." "That's all right, Billy," smiled the doctor. "What he needs just now is something less cold than money. We'll take him upstairs and give him a warm bath, fill his little stomach up with milk, and put him to bed, with a nice fuzzy blanket to thaw out his icy little legs." "Splendid!" said Ricketts. "But see here, doctor, I want to be in on this. Isn't there anything I can do to help?" "Yes," said the doctor. "You might make this proceeding regular by putting him up as your guest on a 10-day card." The little bundle of rags and humanity was tenderly carried to the regions above, and under the almost womanly ministrations of Dr. Mallerby was completely restored to cleanliness and warmth. What hunger he might have been conscious of was assuaged by a great bumper of milk, and then in the most sumptuous apartment the club was able to provide, the thawed-out little gamin was put to bed. The snowy sheets, the soft downy pillows, and the soul-warming blankets were not needed to lure him into the land of dreams, for the bitter experiences of the earlier hours of the night still weighed heavily upon his eyelids, even if his mind and heart were no longer conscious of them. He presented a most appealing picture as he lay there, after settling back with a deep-drawn sigh of content into the kindly embrace of a bed 7 or 8 sizes too big for him, his little legs scarcely reaching half-way to the middle, and his tousled head of red hair forming a rubricated spot on the milk-white pillow-case as it stuck up out of the bedclothes, and lay comfortably back in what was probably the first soft nest it had known since it lay on its mother's breast, if indeed it had ever known that rare felicity. "There," said the doctor, as the little foundling, with a suspicion of a smile on his pursed-up lips, wandered more deeply into the land of Nod. "I guess he's fixed for the night, anyhow, and the rest of us can go about our business." The 7 men tiptoed softly out of the room, and adjourned to the spacious chambers below, where for an hour they tried to lose themselves in the chaos of bridge. They were all fairly expert players at that noble social obsession, but nobody would have guessed it that night. No party of beginners ever played quite so atrociously, and yet no partner was found sufficiently outraged to be acrimonious. The fact was that not one of them was able to keep his mind on the cards, the thoughts of every one of them reverting constantly to the wan little figure in that upper room. Finally, Dobbleigh, after having reneged twice and trumped his partner's trick more than once, threw down his cards and drew away from the table impatiently. "It's no use, fellows," he said. "I can't keep my eye on the ball. I'm going to bed." "Same here," said Ricketts. "Every blessed face card in this pack, queen, jack, or king, is a red-headed little newsboy to me, and every spade is a heart. It's me for Slumberland." So the party broke up, and within an hour the clubhouse went dark. Dr. Mallerby assumed possession of a single room adjoining that of their little guest, so that he might keep an eye upon his newly acquired patient through the night, and the others distributed themselves about on the upper floors. At midnight all was still as a sylvan dell in the depths of a winter's night, when no sounds of birds or of rustling leaves or of babbling waters break in upon the quiet of the scene. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when Dr. Mallerby was roused suddenly from his sleep by the sound of stealthy footsteps in the adjoining room where the little sleeper lay. He rose hastily from his couch and entered the room, and was much surprised to see, in the dim light of the hall lamp, no less a person than Dobbleigh, acting rather suspiciously, too. "Hello! What are you up to, Dobby?" he queried in a low whisper, as he espied that worthy, clad in a bathrobe of too ample proportions, stealing out of the room. "Why, nothing, Mallerby, nothing," replied Dobbleigh, evidently much embarrassed. "I just thought I'd run down and see how the little chap was getting along. I'm something of a father myself, you know." "What's all this?" continued the doctor, as his eye fell upon a number of strange-looking objects spread along the foot of the bed, far beyond the reach of the little toes of the sleeper. A book of rhymes with a gorgeous red cover, a small tin trumpet with a pleasing variety of stops, a box of tin soldiers, and a complete Rough Rider's outfit, sword, cap, leggings, and blouse, not to mention an assortment of other things well calculated to delight the soul of youth. "Why," faltered Dobbleigh, his face turning as red as the flag of anarchy, "you see, I happen to have these things along with me, Mallerby, for my own kiddies, you know, and it sort of seemed a pity not to get some use out of them on Christmas morning, and so well, you know, old man." The hand of the doctor gripped that of the intruder, and he tried to assure him that he did know, but he couldn't. He choked up and was about to turn away when the door began moving slowly upon its hinges once more, and Grantham entered, quite as much after the fashion of the stealthy-footed criminals as Dobbleigh. He, too, carried a variety of packages, and under each arm was a tightly packed golf stocking. He started back as he saw Dobbleigh and the doctor standing by the bedside, but it was too late. They had caught him in the act. "Ah, Grantham," said Dobbleigh with a grin, "giving an imitation of a second-story man, eh? What are you going to do with those two stuffed clubs? Sandbag somebody?" "Yes," said Grantham sheepishly. "I've had it in for the doctor for some time, and I thought I'd sneak down and give him one while he slept." "All right, Granny," smiled the doctor. "Just hang your clubs on the foot of the bed here, and after I've got to sleep again come in and perpetrate the dastardly deed." "Fact is, boys," said Grantham seriously, "these things I was taking home to my youngsters are going to waste under the circumstances, and I had an idea it wouldn't hurt our guest here to wake up just once to a real Santa Claus feast." "Fine!" said the doctor. "Looks to me as if this youngster had thrown doubles. Dobby here has already fitted him out with a complete army, and various other things too numerous to mention." "Why, look who's here!" cried Dobbleigh, interrupting the doctor as the door swung open a third time, and Seymour appeared, his raiment consisting of a blanket and a pair of carpet slippers, causing him in the dim light to give the impression of an Indian on the war-path. "By Jove, Tommy," he added, "all you need is a tomahawk in one hand and a bunch of wooden cigars in the other to pass for the puller-in of a tobacco shop. What are you after, sneaking in here like old Sitting Bull at this unholy hour of the morning? After the kid's scalp?" "Why, you see, Dobby," replied Seymour, revealing a soft, furry cap and a pair of gloves that looked as if they had just been pulled off the paws of a bear cub, "I happen to be taking these things home for my boy Jim. He's daft on skating, and it's cold as the Dickens up at Blairsport, but Jimmy can wait until New Year's for his, I guess. It came over me all of a sudden, while I was trying to get to sleep upstairs, that our honored guest might find them useful." "Look at those chapped little fists," said the doctor. "That's your answer, Seymour." "They're his, all right," said Seymour, sitting on the side of the bed, and comparing the gloves with the red little hands that lay inert on the counterpane. "By Jove!" he muttered, as he took one of the diminutive hands in his own, They're like sandpaper. Selling papers in winter doesn't give these babies exactly the sort of patties you'd expect to find on a mollycoddle," said the doctor. And so, here in the house of the Seven Santas, things went for the next hour. One by one all the prisoners of the night, with the exception of Ricketts, dropped in surreptitiously, to find that the ideas of each were common to them all, and the little mite under the bedclothes was destined soon to emerge from the riches of his dreams into a reality even richer and more substantial. The varied gifts were ranged about the foot of the bed, the golf stockings bulging with sweets were hung at its head, and the big-hearted donors retired, this time to that real sleep which comes to him who has had the satisfaction of some kindly deed to look back upon. "Poor Ricketts!" sighed the doctor as he noted the one absentee. "How much these old bachelors lose at this season of the year!" 2 hours later, just as the first rays of the dawn began to light up the guest room, its small occupant opened his eyes and began rubbing them violently with his fists. "Chee!" was his first utterance, and then he sat up and gazed about him. His unfamiliar surroundings naturally puzzled him, and a look of childish wonder came over his face. "Where am I at?" he muttered. "Guess dis must be dat heaven place de guys down to de mission talks about." He clambered out of bed, and as he did so his eyes took in the wondrous array of gifts spread before him. "Well, what do you know about dat?" he muttered. "What kind of a joint is dis, anyhow?" As he attempted to walk across the room, his small feet became entangled in the flowing skirt of Mallerby's bath robe, which he wore in lieu of a night shirt. "Dat's it," he said, as he tripped and stumbled to the floor. "I'm dead. Dat's what I am. And dese is my angel clothes. Gee, but dey's hard to walk in. Seems to me I'd rather have me pants." In a moment he had regained his feet, and the marvelous variety of toys began to reveal themselves in detail to his astonished vision. "Will yer pipe de layout!" he gasped ecstatically. "Wonder what kid's goin' to have de luck to draw dem in his socks." And just then the door opened again, and a sleepy-eyed old bachelor came stealing in the person of Ricketts. He wore his pajamas, and a yellow mackintosh thrown over his shoulders. "Good morning, Kitty," he said, closing the door softly behind him. "Merry Christmas to you." "Merry Christmas yourself," smiled the youngster. "Say, mister, kin yer tell me where I'm at? Dis ain't like my reg'lar lodgin' house, and I must have got in wrong somehow." "Where is your regular lodging house?" asked Ricketts, seating himself on the side of the bed. "Oh, any old place where there's room for me and me feet in the same time," replied the boy. "Packin' boxes mostly in de winter time, and the docks in de summer." "But your parents?" demanded Ricketts. "Where are they?" "Me what?" asked the boy. "Your parents, your father and mother," explained Ricketts. "I ain't never had no mudder," said the boy. "But me fadder, well, me and him had a scrap over me wages last summer, and I ain't seen him since." "Your wages, eh?" smiled Ricketts. The idea of this little tad earning wages struck him as being rather humorous. "He t'ought I ought to give him de whole wad," said the boy. "And when he licked me for spending a nickel on meself and a friend of mine last 4th of July, I give him de skidoo." "I see," said Ricketts, regarding the little guest with a singular light in his eyes. "You've got a fine lot of stuff here from old Santa Claus, haven't you?" "What? Me?" asked the boy, gazing earnestly into Ricketts' face. "Is dese here tings for me?" "Why, of course," said Ricketts. "Old Daddy Santa Claus on his rounds last night found you occupying a handsome apartment on Fifth Avenue, but the steam heat had been turned off, and fearing you might catch cold, he picked you up and brought you to his own home. He'd been looking for you all day." "And D's is really for me?" cried the child. "Every blessed stick and shred of them," said Ricketts fervently. The boy squatted flat upon the floor, completely staggered by the sudden revelation of his wealth. "Gee!" was all he could think of to say. And then began a romp through a veritable toyland, in which two lonely wanderers through the vales of life had the first taste of joys they had never known before: the red-headed little son of the streets getting the first glimpse of kindness that his starved little soul had ever enjoyed; the confirmed old bachelor finding the only outlet that fate had ever vouchsafed him for those instincts of fatherhood which are the priceless heritage of us all. Small wonder that the play waxed fast, furious, and noisy. The lad, up to this time confronted ever with the pressing necessities of life, developed a capacity for play that was all the more intense for the privations of his limited years, the bachelor finding the dam of his pent-up feelings loosened into an overwhelming flood of pure joyousness. There were cries of joy and shrieks of laughter, and when, with some difficulty, because of his lack of experience, Ricketts finally succeeded in getting the lad arrayed in his Rough Rider suit, whose buckles and buttons seemed aggravatingly small for hands that had developed nothing but thumbs, the tin trumpet, with all the stops save the one that would silence it even temporarily, was brought into play, and the battles that were fought in the ensuing hour between a noble army of warriors, led by the youngster against himself, as either a Spanish army or a wild Indian tribe, have no equals in the annals of warfare. The morning was pretty well advanced when the other sleeping Santas were aroused from their dreams by the shouts of victory, to be confronted, upon investigation, by a prostrate enemy, in the person of Ricketts, lying face downward upon the floor, with a diminutive Rough Rider standing upon the small of his back, waving a nickel sword in the air, while he blew ear-splitting blasts upon his trumpet to announce the arrival of the conqueror. "Well, well, well!" said Dr. Mallerby with a loud laugh, as he and the others burst into the room. "What's going on? Another San Juan Hill?" "The same," panted Ricketts from his coign of disadvantage. "And I'm the hill. All that remains now is for some of you fellows to hurry up and get a bath towel from somewhere and hoist the flag of truce." The morning passed, and the storm showing some signs of abatement, the exiled men began to cherish hopes of getting home before night. Communication with the railway station elicited the gratifying news that about 4 o'clock in the afternoon a train would be sent forth to carry the marooned suburbanites back to the scenes of their domestic desires. Meanwhile, the honored guest received to the full all the attention of which the seven Santas were capable. Only in making up for the lost playtime of the past the guest proved to be untiring, while the seven Santas were compelled now and then to work in relays in order to keep up with the game. Hence it was that at various hours of the day dignified business men were to be seen squatting upon the floor, irrespective of that dignity, running iron cars over tin railway tracks, arranging the serried ranks of tin soldiers in battle array, answering strident summonses to battle sounded on that everlasting tin trumpet, and, strange to say, joining their young friend in feasts of candy and other digestion-destroying sweets which they had forever eschewed long years before. "I suppose I'll suffer for this," said Grantham, as at the command of his superior officer he swallowed the handle of a peppermint walking-stick, after Fletcherizing it carefully for several minutes. "But, by ginger, it's worth it." "You'll be all right, Gran," laughed the doctor. "If worst comes to the worst, I'll blow you to a pony of ipecac, unless you prefer squills." But at last even the strenuous nature of the guest began to show signs of the day's inroads upon his strength, and when the hour for the departure of the suburbanites came shortly before 4, and they all gathered around to bid him their adieus, they were hardly surprised to find him cuddled up on the bearskin rug before the fire, fast asleep, with his tin trumpet hugged tightly to his breast. "We're a great lot," said Dobbleigh suddenly. "We can't all go off and leave him here alone. What the dickens are we going to do?" "Don't bother," said Ricketts from the depths of the lounge, where he had been trying for a few minutes to get a much needed rest. "I haven't anything on hand, boys. Leave him to me. I'll take care of him." "I move we all meet here to morrow," said Grantham, "and see what's to be done with the kid." Ricketts rose up from the lounge and started to speak, but he was interrupted by the doctor. "Did any of you think to ask the little tad his name?" he inquired. "That's where I come in, boys," said Ricketts. "You needn't bother your heads about his name or his tomorrow. I'll take care of both. You men have provided him with the joys of today, pretty substantial joys, too, as those of us who have helped him to enjoy them can testify. As a hearthless old bachelor, bundleless and forlorn, I was unable to qualify on the toy end of things, but when it comes to names, I'll give him one as my contribution to his Christmas possessions." "Good for you, Billy!" laughed Dobbleigh. "Would you mind telling us what it is to be, so that we can put him on our visiting lists?" "Not in the least," returned Ricketts, with an affectionate glance at the boy. "He is to be known henceforth as William Ricketts, Junior." "William Ricketts, Junior!" cried the others, almost in one voice. "Precisely," said Ricketts, turning and facing them. "From now on you fellows will have to quit putting it all over me because you have children and I haven't. I've come into a ready-made family, rather unexpectedly, but there it is. It's mine, and I'm going to keep it. I've been without one too long, and after what I have tasted this day I find that I have acquired a thirst for paternity that can never be cured. Tomorrow I propose to adopt our small guest here, formally, by due process of law." "But where do we come in on this?" cried Grantham. "It's bully of you, old man, but we can't permit you to shoulder the whole burden of this boy's—" "Shut up, Gran," retorted Ricketts with an affectation of fine scorn. "You and the rest of this bunch are nothing but a lot of blooming uncles. And, by the way, gentlemen," he added with a courtly bow, "I thank you all from the bottom of my heart for your kindness to my son. Good night." And with that 6 of the exiles passed out into the twilight and hurried back to their own firesides, leaving Ricketts to his own. And that is why, too, that the club servants, when they came to make their rounds that night, before turning out the lights, were surprised to find old Billy Ricketts lying fast asleep in the warm embrace of one of the richly upholstered arm chairs of the lounging room, before the blazing log fire on the hearth, with a mite of a boy curled up in his lap, his little red head snuggled close to the manly chest of his protector, and a happy little smile upon his lips that showed that his dreams were sweet, and that in those arms he felt himself secure from the trials of life. There was that upon the faces of both that gave the watchers pause, and they refrained from waking them, merely turning out the electric lights and tiptoeing softly out of the room, leaving the sleepers bathed in the mellow glow of the dancing flames. 2 lonely hearts had come into their own in the house of the 7 Santas.
A Christmas Sermon by Robert Louis Stevenson. By the time this paper appears, I shall have been talking for 12 months. And it is thought I should take my leave in a formal and seasonable manner. Valedictory eloquence is rare, and deathbed sayings have not often hit the mark of the occasion. Charles II, wit and skeptic, a man whose life has been one long lesson in human incredulity, an easygoing comrade, a maneuvering king, remembered and embodied all his wit and skepticism, along with more than his usual good humor in the famous, "I'm afraid, gentlemen, I'm an unconscionable time a-dying." 1. An unconscionable time a-dying. There's a picture, I'm afraid, gentlemen, of your life and of mine. The sands run out, and the hours are numbered and imputed. And the days go by, and when the last of these finds us, we have been a long time dying. And what else? The very length is something if we reach that hour of separation undishonored, and to have lived at all is doubtless, in the soldierly expression, to have served. There is a tale in Tacitus of how the veterans mutinied in the German wilderness, of how they mobbed Germanicus, clamoring to go home, and of how, seizing their general's hands, these old war-worn exiles passed his finger along their toothless gums. Sunt lacrimae rerum. This is the most eloquent of the songs of Simeon. And when the man has lived to a fair age, he bears his marks of service. He may have never been remarked upon the breach at the head of the army. At least he shall have lost his teeth on the camp bread. The idealism of serious people in this age of ours is of a notable character. It never seems to them that we have served enough. They have a fine impatience of their virtues. It were perhaps more modest to be stingily thankful that we are no worse. It is not only our enemies, those desperate characters. It is we ourselves who know not what we do. Thence springs the glimmering hope that perhaps we do better than we think, that to scramble through this random business with hands reasonably clean, to have played the part of a man or a woman with some reasonable fullness, to have often resisted the diabolic, and at the end to be still resisting it, is for the poor human soldier to have done right well. To ask to see some fruit of our endeavor is but a transcendental way of serving for reward, and what we take to be contempt of self is only greed of higher. And again, if we require so much of ourselves, shall we not require much of others? If we do not genially judge our own deficiencies, is it not to be feared we shall be even stern to the trespasses of others? And he who, looking back on his own life, can see no more than that he has been unconscionably long a-dying, will he not be tempted to think his neighbor unconscionably long of getting hanged? It is probable that nearly all who think of conduct at all think of it too much. It is certain we all think too much of sin. We are not damned for doing wrong, but for not doing right. Christ would never hear of negative morality. Thou shalt was ever his word, with which he superseded thou shalt not. To make our idea of morality center on forbidden acts is to defile the imagination and to introduce into our judgments of our fellow men a secret element of gusto. If a thing is wrong for us, we should not dwell upon the thought of it, or we shall soon dwell upon it with introverted pleasure. If we cannot drive it from our minds, one thing of two. Either our creed is in the wrong, and we must more indulgently remodel it, or else if our morality be in the right, we are criminal lunatics, and should place our persons in restraint. A mark of such unwholesomely divided minds is the passion for interference with others. The fox without the tail was of this breed, but had, if his biographer is to be trusted, a certain antique civility now out of date. A man may have a flaw, a weakness, that unfits him for the duties of life, that spoils his temper, that threatens his integrity, or that betrays him into cruelty. It has to be conquered, but it must never be suffered to engross his thoughts. The true duties lie all upon the farther side and must be attended to with a whole mind so soon as this preliminary clearing of the decks has been effected. In order that he may be kind and honest, it may be needful he should become a total abstainer. Let him become so then, and the next day let him forget the circumstance. Trying to be kind and honest will require all his thoughts. A mortified appetite is never a wise companion. Insofar as he has had to mortify an appetite, he will still be the worse man. And of such an one a great deal of cheerfulness will be required in judging life. and a great deal of humility in judging others. It may be argued again that dissatisfaction with our life's endeavor springs in some degree from dullness. We require higher tasks because we do not recognize the height of those we have. Trying to be kind and honest seems an affair too simple and too inconsequential for gentlemen of our heroic mold. We had rather set ourselves to something bold, arduous, and conclusive. We had rather found a schism or suppress a heresy, cut off a hand or mortify an appetite. But the task before us, which is to co-endure with our existence, is rather one of microscopic fineness. And the heroism required is that of patience. There is no cutting of the Gordian knots of life. Each must be smilingly unraveled. To be honest, to be kind, to earn a little and spend a little less, to make upon the whole a family happier for his presence, to renounce when that shall be necessary and not be embittered, to keep a few friends, but these without capitulation above all, on the same grim condition to keep friends with himself. Here is a task for all that a man has of fortitude and delicacy. He has an ambitious soul who would ask more. He has a hopeful spirit who should look in such an enterprise to be successful. There is indeed one element in human destiny that not blindness itself can controvert. Whatever else we are intended to do, we are not intended to succeed. Failure is the fate allotted. It is so in every art and study. It is so above all in the continent art of living well. Here is a pleasant thought for the year's end and for the end of life. Only self-deception will be satisfied, and there need be no despair for the despairer. 2. But Christmas is not the only mile mark of another year moving us to thoughts of self-examination. It is a season from all its associations, whether domestic or religious, suggesting thoughts of joy. A man dissatisfied with his endeavors is a man tempted to sadness. And in the midst of the winter, when his life runs lowest and he is reminded of the empty chairs of his beloved, it is well he should be condemned to this fashion of the smiling face. Noble disappointment, noble self-denial are not to be admired, not even to be pardoned if they bring bitterness. It is one thing to enter the kingdom of heaven maim, another to maim yourself and stay without. And the kingdom of heaven is of the childlike, of those who are easy to please, who love and who give pleasure. Mighty men of their hands, the smiters and the builders and the judges, have lived long and done sternly and yet preserved this lovely character, and among our carpet interests and twopenny concerns, the shame were indelible if we should lose it. Gentleness and cheerfulness, those come before all morality. They are the perfect duties. And it is the trouble with moral men that they have neither one nor the other. It was the moral man, the Pharisee, whom Christ could not away with. If your morals make you dreary, depend upon it they are wrong. I do not say give them up, for they may be all you have, but conceal them like a vice, lest they should spoil the lives of better and simpler people. A strange temptation attends upon man to keep his eye on pleasures even when he will not share in them, to aim all his morals against them. This very year a lady, singular iconoclast, proclaimed a crusade against dolls, and the racy sermon against lust is a feature of the age. I venture to call such moralists insincere. At any excess or perversion of a natural appetite, their lyre sounds of itself with relishing denunciations, but for all displays of the truly diabolic envy, malice, the mean lie, the mean silence, the calumnious truth, the backbiter, the petty tyrant, the peevish poisoner of family life, their standard is quite different. These are wrong, they will admit, yet somehow not so wrong. There is no zeal in their assault on them. No secret element of gusto warms up the sermon. It is for the things not wrong in themselves that they reserve the choicest of their indignation. A man may naturally disclaim all moral kinship with the Reverend Mr. Zola or the hobgoblin old lady of the dolls, for these are gross and naked instances. And yet in each of us some similar element resides. The sight of a pleasure in which we cannot or else will not share moves us to a particular impatience. It may be because we are envious, or because we are sad, or because we dislike noise and romping, being so refined, or because, being so philosophic, we have an overweighing sense of life's gravity. At least, as we go on in years, we are all tempted to frown upon our neighbor's pleasures. People are nowadays so fond of resisting temptations. Here is one to be resisted. They are fond of self-denial. Here is the propensity that cannot be too peremptorily denied. There is an idea abroad among moral people that they should make their neighbors good. One person I have to make good, myself. But my duty to my neighbor is much more nearly expressed by saying that I have to make him happy, if I may. 3. Happiness and goodness, according to canting moralists, stand in relation of effect and cause. There was never anything less proved or less probable. Our happiness is never in our own hands. We inherit our constitution. We stand buffet among friends and enemies. We may be so built as to feel a sneer or an aspersion with unusual keenness, and so circumstanced as to be unusually exposed to them. We may have nerves very sensitive to pain, and be afflicted with a disease very painful. Virtue will not help us, and it is not meant to help us. It is not even its own reward, except for the self-centered and, I had almost said, the unamiable. No man can pacify his conscience. If quiet be what he want, he shall do better to let the organ perish from disuse, and to avoid the penalties of the law and the minor capitis diminuto of social ostracism is an affair of wisdom, of cunning, if you will, and not of virtue. In his own life, then, a man is not to expect happiness, only to profit by it gladly when it shall arise. He is on duty here. He knows not how or why, and does not need to know. He knows not for what hire, and must not ask. Somehow or other, though he does not know what goodness is, he must try to be good. Somehow or other, though he cannot tell what will do it, he must try to give happiness to others. And no doubt there comes in here a frequent clash of duties. How far is he to make his neighbor happy? How far must he respect that smiling face so easy to cloud, so hard to brighten again? How far on the other side is he bound to be his brother's keeper and the prophet of his own morality? How far must he resent evil? The difficulty is that we have little guidance, Christ's sayings on the point being hard to reconcile with each other, and, the most of them, hard to accept. But the truth of his teaching would seem to be this: in our own person and fortune, we should be ready to accept and to pardon all. It is our cheek we are to turn. Our coat we are to give away to the man who has taken our cloak. But when another's face is buffeted, perhaps a little of the lion will become us best. That we are to suffer others to be injured and stand by is not conceivable and surely not desirable. Revenge, says Bacon, is a kind of wild justice. Its judgments at least are delivered by an insane judge. And in our own quarrel we can see nothing truly and do nothing wisely. But in the quarrel of our neighbor, let us be more bold. One person's happiness is as sacred as another's. When we cannot defend both, let us defend one with a stout heart. It is only in so far as we are doing this that we have any right to interfere. The defense of B is our only ground of action against A. A has as good a right to go to the devil as we to go to glory, and neither knows what he does. The truth is that all these interventions and denunciations and militant mongerings of moral half-truths, though they be sometimes needful, though they are often enjoyable, do yet belong to an inferior grade of duties. Ill temper and envy and revenge find here an arsenal of pious disguises. This is the playground of inverted lusts. With a little more patience and a little less temper, a gentler and wiser method might be found in almost every case. And the knot that we cut by some fine, heady quarrel scene in private life, or in public affairs by some denunciatory act against what we are pleased to call our neighbor's vices, might yet have been unwoven by the hand of sympathy. To look back upon the past year, and to see how little we have striven and to what small purpose, and how often we have been cowardly and hung back, or temerarious and rushed unwisely in, and how every day and all day long we have transgressed the law of kindness. It may seem a paradox, but the bitterness of these discoveries, a certain consolation resides. Life is not designed to minister to a man's vanity. He goes upon his long business most of the time with a hanging head, and all the time like a blind child, full of rewards and pleasures as it is, so that to see the day break or the moon rise, or to meet a friend, or to hear the dinner call when he is hungry, fills him with surprising joys. This world is yet for him no abiding city. Friendships fall through, health fails. Weariness assails him. Year after year he must thumb the hardly varying record of his own weakness and folly. It is a friendly process of detachment. When the time comes that he should go, there need be few illusions left about himself. Here lies one who meant well, tried a little, failed much. Surely that may be his epitaph, of which he need not be ashamed. Nor will he complain at the summons which calls a defeated soldier from the field. Defeated, aye, if he were Paul or Marcus Aurelius. But if there is still 1 inch of fight in his old spirit, undishonored, the faith which sustained him in his lifelong blindness and lifelong disappointment will scarce even be required in this last formality of laying down his arms. Give him a march with his old bones. There, out of the glorious sun-colored earth, out of the day and the dust and the ecstasy, there goes another faithful failure. From a recent book of verse, where there is more than one such beautiful and manly poem, I take this memorial piece. It says better than I can what I love to think. Let it be our parting word. A late lark twitters from the quiet skies and from the west, where the sun, his day's work ended, lingers as in content. There falls on the old gray city an influence luminous and serene, a shining peace. The smoke ascends in a rosy golden haze. The spires shine and are changed. In the valley shadows rise. The lark sings on. The sun, closing his benediction, sinks, and the darkening air thrills with a sense of the triumphing night. Night, with her train of stars, and her great gift of sleep. So be my passing. My task accomplished and the long day done. My wages taken, and in my heart some late lark singing. Let me be gathered to the quiet west, the sundown splendid and serene, death.
What Christmas Is as We Grow Older, by Charles Dickens. Time was, with most of us, when Christmas Day, encircling all our limited world like a magic ring, left nothing out for us to miss or seek, bound together all our home enjoyments, affections, and hopes, grouped everything and everyone around the Christmas fire, and made the little picture shining in our bright young eyes complete. Time came, perhaps, all so soon, when our thoughts overleaped that narrow boundary, when there was someone very dear, we thought then, very beautiful, and absolutely perfect, wanting to the fullness of our happiness, when we were wanting too, or we thought so, which did just as well, at the Christmas hearth by which that someone sat, and when we intertwined with every wreath and garland of our life that someone's name. That was the time for the bright visionary Christmases which have long arisen from us to show faintly, after summer rain, in the palest edges of the rainbow. That was the time for the beautified enjoyment of things that were to be, and never were, and yet the things that were so real in our resolute hope that it would be hard to say now what realities achieved since have been stronger. What? Did that Christmas never really come when we and the priceless pearl, who was our young choice, were received, after the happiest of totally impossible marriages, by the two united families previously at daggers drawn in our account? When brothers and sisters-in-law, who had always been rather cool to us before our relationship was effected, perfectly doted on us, and when fathers and mothers overwhelmed us with unlimited incomes? Was that Christmas dinner never really eaten, after which we arose, and generously and eloquently rendered honor to our late rival, present in the company, then and there exchanging friendship and forgiveness, and founding an attachment not to be surpassed in Greek or Roman story, which subsisted until death? Has that same rival long ceased to care for that same priceless pearl, and married for money, and become usurious? Above all, do we really know now that we should probably have been miserable if we had won and worn the pearl, and that we are better without her? That Christmas, when we had recently achieved so much fame, when we had been carried in triumph somewhere, for doing something great and good, when we had won an honored and ennobled name, and arrived and were received at home in a shower of tears of joy, is it possible that that Christmas has not come yet? And is our life here, at the best, so constituted that, pausing as we advance at such a noticeable milestone in the track as this great birthday, we look back on the things that never were, as naturally and full as gravely as on the things that have been and are gone, or have been and still are? If it be so, and so it seems to be, must we come to the conclusion that life is little better than a dream, and little worth the loves and strivings that we crowd into it? No! Far be such miscalled philosophy from us, dear reader, on Christmas Day. Nearer and closer to our hearts be the Christmas spirit, which is the spirit of active usefulness, perseverance, cheerful discharge of duty, kindness, and forbearance. It is in the last virtues especially that we are, or should be, strengthened by the unaccomplished visions of our youth. For who shall say that they are not our teachers to deal gently even with the impalpable nothings of the earth? Therefore, as we grow older, let us be more thankful that the circle of our Christmas associations, and of the lessons that they bring, expands. Let us welcome every one of them, and summon them to take their places by the Christmas hearth. Welcome, old aspirations, glittering creatures of an ardent fancy, to your shelter underneath the holly. We know you, and have not outlived you yet. Welcome, old projects and old loves, however fleeting, to your nooks among the steadier lights that burn around us. Welcome, all that was ever real to our hearts, and for the earnestness that made you real, thanks to heaven. Do we build no Christmas castles in the clouds now? Let our thoughts, fluttering like butterflies among these flowers of children, bear witness. Before this boy there stretches out a future, brighter than we ever looked on in our old romantic time, but bright with honor and with truth. Around this little head on which the sunny curls lie heaped, the graces sport, as prettily, as airily as when there was no scythe within the reach of time to shear away the curls of our first love. Upon another girl's face, near it, placider but smiling bright, a quiet and contented little face, we see home fairly written. Shining from the word, as rays shine from a star, we see how, when our graves are old, other hopes than ours are young, other hearts than ours are moved, how other ways are smoothed, how other happiness blooms, ripens, and decays. No, not decays, for other homes and other bands of children, not yet in being, nor for ages yet to be, arise and bloom and ripen to the end of all. Welcome, everything, welcome alike what has been and what never was, and what we hope may be, to your shelter underneath the holly, to your places round the Christmas fire, where what is sits open-hearted. In yonder shadow do we see obtruding furtively upon the blaze an enemy's face? By Christmas Day we do forgive him. If the injury he has done us may admit of such companionship, let him come here and take his place. If otherwise, unhappily, let him go hence, assured that we will never injure nor accuse him. On this day we shut out nothing. Pause, says a low voice. Nothing? Think. On Christmas Day we will shut out from our fireside nothing. Not the shadow of a vast city, where the withered leaves are lying deep, the voice replies. Not the shadow that darkens the whole globe, not the shadow of the city of the dead. Not even that. Of all days in the year we will turn our faces towards that city upon Christmas Day, and from its silent hosts bring those we loved among us. City of the dead, in the blessed name wherein we are gathered together at this time, and in the presence that is here among us, according to the promise, we will receive, and not dismiss, thy people who are dear to us. Yes, we can look upon these children angels that alight so solemnly, so beautifully, among the living children by the fire, and can bear to think how they departed from us. Entertaining angels, unawares, as the patriarchs did, the playful children are unconscious of their guests, but we can see them, can see a radiant arm around one favorite neck, as if there were a tempting of that child away. Among the celestial figures there is one, a poor, misshapen boy on earth, of a glorious beauty now, of whom his dying mother said it grieved her much to leave him here, alone, for so many years as it was likely would elapse before he came to her, being such a little child. But he went quickly, and was laid upon her breast, and in her hand she leads him. There was a gallant boy, who fell far away upon a burning sand beneath a burning sun, and said, "Tell them at home, with my last love, how much I could have wished to kiss them at once, but that I died contented, and had done my duty." Or there was another, over whom they read the words, "Therefore we commit his body to the deep," and so consigned him to the lonely ocean and sailed on. Or there was another, who lay down to his rest in the dark shadow of great forests, and on earth awoke no more. Oh, shall they not, from sand and sea and forest, be brought home at such a time? There was a dear girl, almost a woman, never to be one, who made a mourning Christmas in a house of joy, and went her trackless way to the silent city. Do we recollect her, worn out, faintly whispering what could not be heard, and falling into that last sleep for weariness? Oh, look upon her now! Oh, look upon her beauty, her serenity, her changeless youth, her happiness! The daughter of Jairus was recalled to life, to die, but she, more blessed, has heard the same voice, and sang unto her, "Arise forever." We had a friend who was our friend from early days, with whom we often pictured the changes that were to come upon our lives, and merrily imagined how we would speak, and walk, and think, and talk, when we came to be old. His destined habitation in the city of the dead received him in his prime. Shall he be shut out from our Christmas remembrance? Would his love have so excluded us? Lost friend, lost child, lost parent, sister, brother, husband, wife, we will not so discard you. You shall hold your cherished places in our Christmas hearts, and by our Christmas fires, and in the season of immortal hope, and on the birthday of immortal mercy, we will shut out nothing. The winter sun goes down over town and village. On the sea it makes a rosy path, as if the sacred tread were fresh upon the water. A few more moments, and it sinks, and night comes on, and lights begin to sparkle in the prospect. On the hillside, beyond the shapelessly diffused town, and in the quiet keeping of the trees that gird the village steeple, remembrances are cut in stone, planted in common flowers, growing in grass, entwined with lowly brambles around many a mound of earth. In town and village there are doors, and windows closed against the weather. There are flaming logs heaped high, there are joyful faces, there is healthy music of voices, but all ungentleness and harm excluded from the temples of the household gods, but be those remembrances admitted with tender encouragement. They are of the time and all its comforting and peaceful reassurances, and of the history that reunited even upon earth the living and the dead, and of the broad beneficence and goodness that too many men have tried to tear to narrow shreds.
Where rocks and asps are fading,
If you like what you hear, please leave us a review on iTunes, like us on Facebook. You can download our app for iOS devices, Android devices, Windows phones. You can listen to CraftLit on Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, Google Play Music. And remember, if your hands are too busy to pick up a book, at least you can turn one on.